Hey, everybody, it's Natalie Bencivenga, and welcome to another edition of Facts Over Fear. This is a good one, you guys, because there's a lot happening with ICE, not just around the nation as a whole, but right in our own backyards here in Western Pennsylvania. And today we're traveling to Lehigh County. So, Lehigh County officials are moving to evict federal immigration agents after discovering that ICE has failed to pay, wait for it, more than $115,000 in rent for office space in a county owned building since 2022. County Controller Mark Pinsley, who's joining me today, says the problem traces back to a lease that was never fully signed. We're going to get all of the details on that, meaning that this agreement never actually entered the county's systems and payments were never collected. Now, Mark and others are calling not just for a repayment, but for ICE to just be removed entirely from the building, arguing that the county should not be associated with the agency at all. I'm curious as to why you're taking that position. And this dispute is going to be raising broader questions around government oversight, accountability, and the role of local governments in federal immigration enforcement. I've been having this conversation with plenty of people from around the city, including the sheriff of Bucks County, who also is very much like ICE needs to get out. So I'm very curious to hear from your perspective, Mark. So thank you so much for joining me.
No, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Anybody, if you have questions for Mark Pinsley, please put them in the chat below. And as always, please be respectful. So let's kick things off by saying, let's start here. Walk us through how this lease fell through the cracks. How does a deal that has been approved by commissioners end up unsigned and unpaid for years? And how did this become discovered?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So we don't normally do this, which is that's always the problem. Like when you go outside your normal processes, something is bound to happen.
Hmm.
So for whatever reason, 3 years ago, they needed to move in quickly. I don't know what the reason was, but so what we created was a memorandum of agreement, which basically said, hey, you can move in right now, and within
Hmm.
a 10-month period, we'll have negotiated a contract. And
Okay.
if you ever negotiated contracts, it's never easy. And if you ever negotiated contracts between two government entities, it's even harder,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So what ended up happening was the memorandum of understanding was signed by DHS at that point.
Mhm.
Um, and so they moved in. Turned out that the person who had signed it was not authorized to sign it. So we
Mm.
never even got our first payment from them. In the meantime, in good faith, both parties were working together to try and solve for this issue. But once again, it's very difficult for two different agencies. Like DHS wanted us to use their contract, we wanted them to use our contract, and the two never met. And the contract holder on our side, I think over time it just became a kerfuffle, right? Like they
Yeah.
forgot about it, like it became less important. And then what ended up happening more recently was we have a new executive. His name's Josh Siegel. When he came in, there were retirements that happened, and just
Mhm.
changes of the guard. And so when that happened, the person that was in charge of this contract retired, and somebody gave us a tip, which happens often in the controller's office. We always get tips
Mm.
about something financial, which said that they were in the building, which quite honestly I didn't know,
Mm.
and that they hadn't paid. And when we first looked at it, quite honestly, I wasn't positive they didn't pay. Sometimes things
Mm.
can go into the wrong account. Things happen. But we did. We investigated it. We confirmed that they were in fact in the building, and they themselves admitted that they had never made a payment. So that clarified everything.
Wow. This is fascinating to me that this happened and went on for so long. For people outside of government, wouldn't there just be I mean, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, how did this go on for so long? But I guess to your point, it just was sort of like this comedy of errors of of just one thing after another, and obviously this not being the only thing that you're dealing with, right? I
Right.
mean,
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's so. Normally, what would happen is when that MOA, the memorandum of agreement, was signed.
mhm.
When we signed it, it would go into our computer system, and then we, as the controller's office, would follow it. It never made it into the computer system
I see.
because it was not an authorized signature, and they started going back and forth. And then like we don't go around the office. Like the controller's office doesn't go
Right.
around the office to see who's like renting and who isn't renting. We don't have that many rentals. We don't really. It's not one of
Hmm.
our priority items. And so that was really it. I really do think it was a comedy of errors. It was unfortunate.
And when we're talking about the unauthorized signature, how did that come to be? Because I would think you would know, like the person signing would know that they're authorized to do it. That seems confusing.
That seems confusing to me too. I
Okay.
don't know how that happened, and I'm not sure why we wouldn't have almost immediately gotten a new signature.
Right.
But I think
Hmm.
probably what was going through legal's mind, because now at that point it's in our solicitor's hands.
Hmm.
They were probably like, "Look, we're getting this done. We're going to get the contract done. Why bother worrying about the MOA? They're already in here. They're going to pay." Like
Right.
normally, you think the federal government is going to pay their bills.
Normally, Mark, you would think that. In more precedented times, you might
Yes,
think that. Yes.
yes,
If
exactly.
you're if you're just joining me, I'm Natalie Bencivenga, and I'm chatting with Mark Pinsley. He is the county controller in Lehigh County, and we're talking about ICE has a big bill that they've racked up in a county building to the tune of more than $115,000. So you said that the county shouldn't actually support ICE at all. I was reading some other materials before this. Is this primarily a financial oversight issue at this point because of what happened in the building with this rent, or is this more of a moral stance, a political stance? Where are your thoughts in terms of why ICE really shouldn't be supported at the county level?
Yeah, so it is both. It's definitely a financial issue. At this point, it's been 3 years. There's no point. Like we would never have given anyone else that amount of time. I don't care who it was.
Hmm.
So let's just start there.
Sure.
But then there's a political component to it, which is actually twofold. So
Hmm.
one is personally, I don't believe that we should be housing any federal agents. Period.
Hmm.
Forget about ICE. Why? Because treating our residents as residents, not citizens. Like we
Got it.
shouldn't like the federal government, they can care, right? And when we're
Right.
voting, we can care. But like on a day-to-day basis, if an immigrant sees that you're robbed, we want that immigrant to notify the police. So we
Right.
want to have that kind of relationship with them. And if we're treating them as only citizens, then that person's not going to feel comfortable coming into the cops or the sheriff's office and doing anything. So
Hmm.
from my perspective, we need to treat them as residents, and therefore we don't want any confusion as to whether we're partnering with any federal agency. So that's number one. Then number two, going on in Minnesota, in
Mm.
Minneapolis specifically, like you have to have your eyes closed not to be
Yeah.
worried about that.
Well, and that's what I wanted to ask you specifically. And if you notice, sometimes I'm taking notes so I don't forget things while you're speaking. So don't mind me, because you're saying really important things. To your point, if ICE would have come to you today, as opposed to in 2022, and said, "Hey, we want to rent some space," would the answer have been different?
For me, it would have been hell no.
Yeah.
Now, like to be honest, I don't remember that contract going through, but like I
Hmm.
do read all that stuff, so it didn't flag anything for me back
Sure.
then, right? And so, admittedly, and not only that, at that time they were saying they were DHS,
Hmm.
but
Mm.
even then, like I just don't think federal people should be in our building. Um, but it was a different time, so
Yeah.
it didn't raise any red flags for me. Today, if I saw DHS, if I saw ICE, if I saw ERO, if I saw HSI, no,
Yeah.
I would not be for it at all.
Are you shocked at sort of this level of hostility right now between state and federal communities? Because I think it is really interesting, at least in my mind. I've never seen this level of tension between the federal government and the state governments, especially, let's say, quote unquote, the blue states, or in Pennsylvania's case, even the purplish
Yes,
states.
yep.
Can you speak to that from a historical perspective in your mind? Is this a new feeling, this level of tension? And does it concern you, especially as we're hearing that they would like to put ICE at polling places during elections and have people stationed there, this continuation of this ramping up of this kind of tension?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very worried about that. So first off, yes, I think that this is the. So I'm controller now. I'm in my seventh year. Even during Trump's first term, I don't remember there being such tension between the state
Mm.
and the federal government. So now he has a new group of people in there that are very Project 2025,
Mhm.
motivated. And like I don't know what their goal is. It doesn't seem like they want to be the United States of America, but maybe the blue and red states of America
Hmm.
is perhaps where they're going. And so that has become very difficult. Um, I do feel that while I may not have felt that way, we do have, there are flags, don't tread on me. There are, things where,
Hmm.
perhaps the Republicans in particular maybe did feel that way or they wanted it this way,
Mm.
and so, like I hear a lot today of that's not America or that's not American or things like that. And I hate that saying
Hmm.
because we had slaves. We incarcerate or didn't incarcerate, put in homes the Japanese. We turned away the Jews. You know, there's a lot of things that were America.
Yeah.
So it really is about what's the narrative that we want going forward. And this narrative is not what I want for sure.
And I hear that. It's funny that you brought that up. I'm actually doing an interview later today about ICE being a uniquely American thing, right? To your point, like we have this history. And I think saying things like, well, this isn't who we are really erases and minimizes the suffering and the damage that, the United States government has done to so many marginalized groups since really the inception and beyond, even when it was just colonies. And so I think it is important to frame it in that way. And I appreciate that perspective. Let's get back to the money, though,
Yep,
because it is fascinating to me. Okay. The lease rate, too, not only do they owe $115,000, but the lease rate was reportedly below market value. Does that matter? Why
it
does
does.
that
Yes.
matter? And,
So,
and
so
what is the precedent for future agreements now that this is setting?
little charter. So basically our constitution, if you will, within the
Mm-hmm.
county basically says that if we're renting something out, it has to be at market value. If you go back to that, when they actually there's a video of the meeting where they approved this. The
Mm-hmm.
question was asked, was this at market rate? The answer was yes. I don't know if that's true 3 years ago. It doesn't seem like it would have been true 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Somebody like did a misestimated. I don't know what happened, but we don't want payers own that building,
Yeah.
right? So they're entitled to getting at least market rate, not
Mm-hmm.
more, not less, but what it should be. And there's no reason. And by the way, like when you think, I don't know if you've been watching, but like in Bucks County and Berks
Mm-hmm.
County, like they're buying these detention centers, or
Mm-hmm.
excuse me, they're buying these warehouses that turn into
Yes.
detention centers, right?
Yeah.
When they buy that land went from a taxable piece of property to a free piece of property,
Mm.
right?
Because it's government owned.
It's government owned. It's U.S. government owned. The state, the county cannot charge them taxes. So all of that property tax is gone.
Mhm.
Um, so there's no reason for us to give anything for free that we
Mhm.
can that we can get money for from the federal government. They should pay just like anyone else should pay. They have other benefits that they get from the state.
Wow. So this is all very interesting then. So this this really seems like it was a bad deal from the jump in terms of how it's impacted this community and also the tax base. Um let's talk a little bit about then the lease was estimated to bring in around $141,000 for the county if properly executed. What would collecting that owned rent, all that owed rent, excuse me, mean for local services or fiscal planning? Because at the end of the day, like you said, they don't own this. It is a leased property. So this is revenue theoretically
Yep.
coming into the county. So what would that have been hopefully earmarked for or a part of?
So right now it would go into our general fund, and what that means
Hmm.
is it could be used for anything. Which also means, by the way, that let's say that we had some kind of increase. Phone calls cost more. The
Hmm.
paper costs more. Whatever. Like at some point, we have to pass that on to the taxpayer. Right.
Right.
At some point, we do. So any money that we have coming in from the federal government helps us make sure that we don't have to tax the taxpayer.
Hmm.
Now, in this case, what I have said, if we are able to collect, I believe that we should donate at least some of that money to the immigrant community for whatever their needs are.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
that's just, and that's very personal to me. That's like, the commissioners will have to decide whether they want to do that or not.
Let's talk about the commissioners here for a moment, because when I read the article in Pennsylvania Capital Star, which is a nonprofit newsroom based out of Harrisburg, um, this deal was approved after it seemed like a very brief discussion. Is that also normal? Like, these kinds of lease opportunities are very brief in nature. And what would you like to see change about that, if anything, in how these decisions are uh, reviewed going forward?
Yeah, so I would say so there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes, so that by the time it gets to the public forum, they've already gone through
Hmm.
it. A solicitor has already looked at it. The person who's in charge of the contract has already looked at it. It's probably gone through committee. So there's a
Hmm.
lot of stuff that actually did happen. And the commissioners were made aware of that during that process. And then so that does seem brief. And then they, of course, ask the questions publicly.
Yeah.
I think the thing that I would want to see happen in the future, well, first off, is I think that we should evaluate things, as I said. Like, if we want to have somebody come in, it should not be a federal government. It should not be anything that would somehow make us look worrisome to a resident.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Let's just keep that separate. And then secondarily, what I would say is like, if we do have memorandums of understanding or memorandums of agreement, um, there should be a separate way for us to track those, so that we can say,
Yeah.
oh yeah, we had this memorandum, we canceled it. Fine.
Right.
We didn't cancel it. What's the status of this? Let's look at it again. Because
Right.
that's
Like a
really what
90-day review or something built
exactly.
in. So there's like a red flag on your Google Calendar, maybe.
Exactly right. Exactly.
One of many flags, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
you had mentioned County Executive Josh Siegel, earlier, and he's saying he's moving to evict ICE. So, what does that process actually look like? Because this has been such a long-term thing, and are there going to be potential consequences? Are you worried? I mean, we we know the Trump administration is vengeful, to say the least. Are you worried about any blowback? Are you worried about any ICE activity ramping up if that were to happen, or do you think it's really not that charged?
I would never say it's not that charged, especially with our president. I honestly don't know from that
Yeah.
perspective. What I would say is that I don't think we haven't gotten any. So the process itself looks like we send them a letter saying you've got
Hmm.
X number of days. We could have actually said you've got 2 days and get out. He didn't. Josh Siegel gave them 30 days. That letter was already sent. I can't remember what the final date is. To the best of my knowledge, there has been no pushback. I have not gotten
Hmm.
any pushback from ICE.
Hmm.
Um, so they're probably in the process of looking for new space.
Okay.
Uh, if by chance,
Still in Lehigh County.
perhaps,
Okay.
um, let's say that they didn't vacate in that 30-day period. They have swipe badges to get in. We just turn off the swipe badges. Now they can't get in.
That's fair.
Yeah,
I mean, that does work.
yeah. So that's that.
Yeah.
And if they had like materials or stuff like that, then we would just have the sheriff go down and remove those items and provide them access in that way.
Sure. Let's talk about the flip side of this, because not everyone wants to see ICE leave this building. Some local officials have argued that the presence of federal agents they help with investigations into serious crimes like human trafficking. How do you respond to concerns that eviction could potentially harm public safety partnerships?
I find that to be just baloney, I guess is the
Okay.
way I would put it. Um, you know, uh, uh, so look, let's say that they had a place across the street. I don't think there is
Hmm.
a place across the street, but if they had a place across the street, what does it matter where they're
Right.
located? Most things are done by computer today. Most things are done by cell phone today. It's not like being next to us matters that much.
Hmm.
If they need to
Hmm.
come in for a period of time, they could sit in the DA's office. There's conference rooms. There's lots of ways that we can work together. So it's just nonsense.
It's silly.
Yeah.
If you're just joining me, I'm Natalie Bencivenga. I'm chatting with Mark Pinsley. He's the county controller in Lehigh County. We've just a few more questions, but I wanted to make sure we got to some of the comments. Mark Fresalone, I don't know, maybe I pronounced that correctly. Mark has a comment. States could offer to legally secure reasonably documented illegal aliens on behalf of feds. They wouldn't agree, but strong statement. What they're saying basically is there are other ways to potentially work together with ICE.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, I don't think it's our responsibility. It's the federal government's responsibility to work with them. I understand what he's
Hmm.
saying. Um, like, look, I'm Jewish.
Hmm.
And so, like, there used to be a question when I grew up, which was, if no, I can't think of her name, of course. Yeah, the little girl that was up at the stairs, up in
And
the
Frank.
attic. And Frank, thank you.
Hmm.
Can't believe I forgot that as a
Oh, that's okay.
Jew.
There's a lot going on in our minds these days. We'll give you a pass, Mark. Don't worry.
Thank you. Like, if Anne Frank came and knocked on your door, what would
Hmm.
you do?
Hmm.
Would you hide
Yeah.
her? Would you
Right.
send her away?
Right.
And like, I don't, for sure.
Hmm.
But I know that there are other people that are going to turn her in.
Yeah.
And so when we're talking about this, like, I feel, and by the way, like, I do believe that we need new immigration laws,
Yeah.
right? That we all agree to, by the way,
Hmm.
right? And
Hmm.
including people that are immigrants that have gone through it legally. Let's let them help us create those new laws.
That would make sense.
And if you remember during Biden's term, they had a new immigration law that was written by the Democrats and by the Republicans, and Trump shut that down.
Yeah.
Why? So he could put ICE in there so he could have his own private army. Like, I believe that this is very intentional.
I couldn't agree more to that point. And I would also add that what Biden had created very much favored the conservatives and what they wanted. It wasn't this, pie in the sky woo woo liberal agenda. It was very much criticized by people on the left for being too conciliatory, and they still shut it down. So I
Yep.
think there's definitely something to be said about that. And I appreciate your point of bringing up and Frank, as we're seeing so many children being kidnapped by this regime and placed in detention camps, and so many people that their only quote unquote crime is not having the properly filled out paperwork. And I do think that there are a lot of ways that we could be solving the immigration crisis, especially when we look at a state like Pennsylvania that is aging,
Yep.
that is losing population. Our minimum wage has been stagnating at a starvation wage of $7.25 an hour. Um, People aren't moving here, right? The communities that I report on, I'm doing a show called Destination with Natalie Bencivenga that's focused on the impact immigrants are making in our communities here in Western Pennsylvania, and it's in partnership with WQED. It's incredible to me the communities that immigrants are saving because of their presence, because they're
Yep.
opening businesses and raising families and buying homes and turning once blighted neighborhoods into beautiful places to live and work and be. So I think we have to be really mindful too of this anger towards paperwork because that's really what we're doing here is we're creating all this vitriol and villainizing the other. And we've seen this narrative play out. Like you said, this isn't new. We've lived this directly and indirectly. And so I do think it's important that we're having this very philosophical conversation along with the reality of what is happening in our communities. And I wanted to bring that into focus because I'm hearing you speak. You seem very passionate on these issues. And you're also now deciding to run for Congress. So, can you
Yes.
talk
Yep.
a little bit about your decision? And in the future, I'd love to have you back on to really dive into some of the issues. But what's your why?
So my one is because I do believe we have lost the democracy that I grew up with,
Hmm.
and I don't think that's coming back, by the way.
Mm, mm,
So but I do think we have an opportunity to build a better one. Much better, quite frankly. That's far more inclusive, and far more. It just looks at everybody, not just the few.
hmm.
But we're going to have to fight for that.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily. And while I believe all of the other candidates are good candidates, I don't think that they have that same inner passion towards democracy. And also, quite honestly, we all talk about affordability, but beyond affordability, right? Like, so we talk, like, as an example, we talk about affordable housing. You hear that a lot,
Hmm.
right? Well, you know what an affordable house is? Person know what an affordable house is?
Right. Right.
No, right?
No.
And so an affordable house is 30% of your annual salary will cover the annual rent or mortgage. So if you're making $20,000 a year, the maximum you can pay is $6,000,
Mm,
right? So
wow.
I don't know what your apartments are for out there, but I'm going to imagine there's nothing less than $1,000,
Correct.
right? So that means at minimum, you've got to be making $40,000 a year to
Mm-hmm.
afford that. That's
Mm-hmm.
minimum,
And
right?
that's maybe for a studio, right? Like that's
Right.
we're not even talking about a one bedroom or a two bedroom or anything like that. Mm-hmm.
Right. Exactly. It's nothing. It's nothing.
Right.
And so that doesn't include your healthcare. That doesn't include anything. That's
Mm-hmm.
just your, for your housing. And so when we're saying, well, we got to build more houses, yes, there's some truth to that. But what
Sure.
there's more truth to is that people need to make more money. As you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned, 725 an hour. Minimum really needs to be 45,000 a year to about 21 an hour.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think even beyond that at this point, to your point, I'm excited that you're taking on this endeavor. I didn't, when we first started chatting, I obviously wanted to focus on the situation in Lehigh County, but I do think that vision and forward momentum and compassionate people-centered policy is what people are looking for regardless of political affiliation.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing a little bit about your why. Pennsylvania's 7th district, so who would you be representing?
So it's like Allentown, Bethlehem, Easton is what most people think of, and Carbon County. So it's really Lehigh County, Northampton County, a little bit of Monroe County, and all of Carbon County.
Well, I look forward to having you back on and to discuss more of your journey and to really get into some policy questions with you next time if you'll be back.
No, I'll definitely be back. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And thank you to everybody for weighing in and sharing your thoughts and for tuning in. And above, you can see both myself and Mark on that little scroll ticker. So make sure to subscribe to both of our Substacks. And of course, everyone, until next time, please take care of yourselves and each other. Thanks again, Mark.
Thank you.